Yes.
Yeah, and that's a big point here. Is really how many people do you think in the state of Pennsylvania even know that this Real ID Act is going to hit May 2008?
I don't know if I could put a number on it, but it would have to be very, very small.
Mm-hmm.
Very small. I would say only limited to those who who regularly are doing their research and are looking at alternative media and finding it from places like that, because it has not been covered in the normal media, regular media.
Mm-hmm.
It's not been an issue of discussion on most, even talk radio at this point. And it really is a shame, because it needs to be, it's worthy of great attention. But it's interesting to note that where it has been discussed, and even within this legislative body, both on the right and the left, there is a real strong sense of opposition, but there's not, even then, there's not a real, I would say, full understanding of how bad it is.
Mm-hmm. What would you say to the citizens who are very shy about involving themselves in the political process? What does it mean to you as a representative to have citizens write letters and emails and things like that?
I would encourage anyone who would watch this to understand that it is extremely important that they become involved if they're not involved in reaching out to both their representative in the state and their senator and in Washington. Oftentimes there's a little bit of natural reluctance to do so, a little bit of fear. There ought not be any fear. I nor anybody else are any different than any other person. We happen to be in a position of representing the people's interest, and oftentimes the way things work, that if, in fact, folks, unless they come here with a very strong constitutional bearing, where they really are able to go to the heart of these kinds of issues and cipher them out of their impact, many respond almost like putting finger to the wind, and therefore they do respond to folks who are not only impassioned but informed. And I think we've seen that. I think we've seen that with the efforts currently underway with the immigration issue in Washington. And it's interesting to note how many of the U.S. senators were aggravated that folks reached out to them.
Right.
I mean, that's bizarre. They ought to be thrilled that they reach out to them. But the mere fact that there is such a strong aversion to hearing from people should not make people fear to reach out. But seeing what happened ought to make them encouraged that reaching out collectively makes a difference. And so I encourage folks to absolutely do that. Come down and actually look eyeball to eyeball. The writing of letters is very good. The sending of emails is also very good. But there's nothing that beats looking eye to eye and talking directly to somebody and say, this is what I believe, this is what I sense, and if you have the information, to lay it down and say, this is why. It's very difficult for someone in office to reject as easily someone when they're sitting here like you are with me, with a logical, impassioned argument, and so there is great gain, and people should do it and need to do it more.
Well, I just want the people out there to know that Representative Rohr here was part of the leadership, really, in the Commonwealth Caucus to try to eliminate property tax, the big property tax reform. Can you tell me why you were part of that?
Well, absolutely. The primary reason for that, again, I mentioned earlier, to constitutional concern. The issue of school property taxes in this state is one that, in my opinion, has as its root a constitutional obligation upon us, from the standpoint that the Constitution very clearly says we are to be secure in our persons and our property. And as I've spoken to over 30,000 people across the state in the last couple of years on this issue, I have asked in every one of those settings, how many of you are secure in your property? Not one hand has gone up on all of those circumstances. And the reason is, in this case, is that property tax has turned into nothing less than government forced rent.
That's right.
And people therefore do not any longer own their properties, and when government has the right to throw you out of your home because you cannot pay your rent, school taxes, then the Constitution is no longer protecting us, and government's responsibility has now been government's now working against the people. So I say at the heart of this issue is the fact that we have a constitutional right that has been subverted, and it's got to be corrected. And then, let alone the fact that we have a fiduciary responsibility to make sure education is funded properly and spending controlled appropriately, neither of which are occurring. So there's a two- or threefold reason why that's approached, but at the heart for me, it's a constitutional and moral urgency, I'd say, to address this and to fix it, because it affects every person in this state, and clearly it affects our children yet unborn if we do not correct this issue.
Well said. Is there any way I could convince you to run against Specter or Casey? Just leapfrog the entire state process and move right to the federal government?
Well,
You're speaking sanely at this point. I don't. And Americans, they're not used to hearing that from our politicians.
Well, there's no constitutional and logical thought is needed on the state level as much as it's needed in Washington. And at this juncture, I'm here. And to the extent that we raise our voice where we are, we do what we can here. But clearly, for me, the whole thing of dealing with issues in an appropriate fashion stems from being honest and understanding what our obligation is as elected official. The only oath that we take, we can make a lot of promises, but the only oath that we take is to support and to defend the constitutions of this Commonwealth and of the United States. And therein lies our obligation. And therein lies our guidelines and goals relative to the expanse and size of government, the way we spend, on what we spend, just like the issues of real ID, knowing that the Constitution has already put into effect limitations on why that should not occur. So for no other reason, we have an obligation and a duty to address those issues, and to me that's a matter of simply honesty.
I find that when you stick with the Constitution and you don't stray from it, boy, you really you stay on track and you don't have problems. It's every time we stray away from the Constitution, that's where we get ourselves into trouble.
People talk about the rule of law. The rule of law is our Constitution. If people enjoy the freedom, which they do in this nation, this freedom cannot be secured nor maintained without the diligent and vigilant defense of this document, which is the contract with the people. And it is regularly disregarded. But it's at the heart, if we are going to reclaim, and I would say reclaim, much of what has been lost, and we're going to maintain and defend that which we still have, it will be only on the basis for us to be able to articulate and be effective and aggressive and motivated in the defense of those articulated rights. That is all. I'll say that is all. It's the most tremendous document that this world has seen outside the Bible, and it's all that stands between us and one world.
Right.
It's all that stands between us and tyranny, right. And so therefore we had better defend it, and every issue that comes down the line to measure it in light of that document. And if we do, then our children are going to be able to perhaps sit right here where we are. But if we don't, they may not.
I want to thank you on behalf of the citizens of Pennsylvania for supporting and defending the Constitution.
You're welcome, and glad to talk with you.
All right.